Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the mornings. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, January 24th, 2025. Making sure I got those numbers correct. Okay. Oh, we got a 25 and a 25 tomorrow. Hooray for the numerologists. Good morning, everybody. And I guess all the ships at sea. And all the people seasteading and living on floating islands of paradise. Not yet in existence, but maybe we can buy them from Greenland. I don't know. Something. That is some weird, wild stuff we read about yesterday. And we'll have to go into, more detail about other things that we missed up until now. There's no way to keep up with the fire hose of garbage, the flooding of the zone, but we'll do our best. It's Friday. Maybe we can make a roundup of it. Sometimes we go into greater detail and greater depth than we want to on a Friday as well. That has been known to happen. And let's see. I need to, I guess I should hit the golden voice tea at this point in the show. Would you like to hear? I mean, I know. Sometimes we get a little slurp here and there. Greg and his coffee, me and the coffee sometimes, yes, sometimes teas, right? I did get a review of yesterday's episode with the golden voice tea. I mean, it was basically like, I don't know about golden voice. I wouldn't say that. I did. Let me see if I can go and find it, too, because somebody had made a comment, I think, over at Patreon, or was it Patreon or was it at YouTube, that somebody commented, golden voice. I expected Pavarotti by the end of the show. Not to be, of course, so that wasn't about singing so much. But yeah, I think it was over at the YouTube channel. I'll see if I can't go and scrounge that one up. But for those interested, by the way, let's see. Let's get a sip of that tea. I'll tell you how it goes. Did you hear there was a genuine sip and everything. Health King Golden Voice, caffeine-free tea. It's a Chinese herbal tea. Scott found it over at, I don't know where. What, Amazon? I don't know. Did you go tea shopping? Did you go to China? Only Scott can go to China, along with Nixon. And come back with it. Helps clear voice and comfort throat. Okay. So I figured, all right, we'll give this one a try. And since it was related to voice, this one would be featured, I guess. Now, what was in it? I mentioned that there was something. It's a proprietary blend, which worries me a little bit just in terms of ingredients. It says proprietary blend. But they do go into some further detail. It's like proprietary blend, ground tires, PCBs. I don't know. No. All right. And of course, like an idiot, I've wandered into another portion of a show where I'm not going to be able to pronounce anything. Sterculia seed. Any idea? Any Sterculia seed fans in the audience? Asparagus root, as I told you about. And what else? There's a lot of roots, basically. Serratia grosvenorelli. Oh, my goodness. I can't. Not only can I not read it, I can't even hardly see it. There's some peppermint. There's some eleuthero leaf. This is really licorice root. How about that? There's it's for one of those natural things. You're supposed to be able to pronounce all the ingredients in a natural concoction like this. But I guess I'm getting the scientific names of these things. All right. Is it actually made in China? It's made in Dalian, China. Sorry, from the Dalian Health King Products Company Limited. Hooray! And distributed by their American arm, Health King USA Incorporated, Los Angeles, California. It may have burned down over the past day or two, but made in China, that seems true. All rights reserved. That's nice to know in China. They don't often reserve your rights for you. So, all right. Well, let's see. I wonder if I can. Oh, yeah. I did want to see if I could dig up that comment about Pavarotti. There we are. Whose comment are we looking at here? Let's see if we can blow it up so we can see these things. Oh, well, clicking on it actually said, go away. You're not allowed to look at it. Evil Limp. Is that right? Evil Limp, then 3 zeros. I don't know if that's a regular listener or someone who just happened by, but I feel like you'd have to be a regular listener to have bothered to listen to the discussion about the tea. All right. Well, at any rate, so there's news. You may have noticed that this stuff is happening. And today, I don't know if I can necessarily make a theme out of it, but there's an awful lot of, well, I guess there's an awful lot of finding out going on today. It's not the dramatic sort of FO, right, thank you, finding out. But it is instead, I don't know, some gentle reminders of the dangers of why don't you justism, I guess. Locally, here in the D.C. area, how all of Trump's stupid orders, and some less stupid than others, believe it or not, are affecting people and the workforce. And some of which I think were probably known and planned, and they went ahead with them anyway, even though they knew it would cause disruption. Others of which, most of which, I think, just are the results of why don't you justism, and then finding out that it just doesn't work like that. For instance, let's see. As I mentioned, here in the D.C. area, very heavily populated by federal employees, although, again, if you actually, study the subject, you find out that, well, a fairly significant portion of federal employees are spread out all over the country for good reason, not just because, of course, they administer things all over the country, and it's wise to be where you're impacting, right? So there's, while there's a national headquarters of the, take a pick, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Department of the Interior. There are also likewise field offices all over the place so that you're, closer to the action, all the things you want government to be. But in the popular opinion, in the childlike and why don't you justism type opinion of Donald Trump, who has, a fantasy version of a television news version of the presidency in his head. They're all in Washington, and they're all in some central bureau somewhere, and they're a bunch of layabouts. And after all, I've heard that many of them don't even report to work anymore. We pay them for nothing, which is his view of the various, and there are several different kinds of remote work for federal employees, some of which came about, only very little of which actually came about during COVID, and kind of stuck around for various reasons, i.e., it actually worked out pretty well. They were able to retain longtime employees or skilled employees, valued employees who wanted to move on elsewhere because they needed to find new childcare arrangements, or commuting was a real horror story for them. And it's like congestion pricing of traffic stuff in New York. They find that D.C. traffic is much more under control if not every single person who is a federal employee has to report to Washington, D.C. at the same time each morning. And it's a long-standing thing. Flex hours, even before there was remote type work available, people could, as long as you put in your 8 hours or whatever in the office. And so you had a lot of early birds arriving at the office at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and leaving in the early afternoon to pick up kids, but it diluted the traffic problems in the morning and the afternoon, things like that. Anyway, the basic story of the why don't you justism trap today on this one is Trump says no more of this remote work. That's when, in his view, people are at home, they must not be working, because when he's at home, he's puttering around the house doing nothing or playing golf. And so he figures everybody else is like that too. No one else can work elsewhere. But like I said, these folks have a long history with it and have been trained to do it and to do it efficiently. And they also have, there's a mountain of studies of, well, when you order everybody to come back to work and they spend 2-3 hours total on their commutes each day, that's 2 or 3 hours that they can't put into work or quality of life elsewhere. And it doesn't work very well. People leave the jobs, or they just are resentful. And at any rate, productivity actually goes up. But in Trump's mind, no, productivity has to go down because they're not at work. So anyway, he orders everybody back to work. There's going to be a return to the office. Every federal employee has to be in person 5 days a week, starting, not quite right now. He was talked out of that, but starting right now, everybody has to plan for how they're going to get everybody back. And I think today is a deadline for most agencies to start submitting their plans for how they're going to get everybody back in. Now, one of the issues, of course, is, mind you, running parallel to all this is the stupid Doge thing, government efficiency, guys, and they're going to get the most efficiency out of their government. And one of the issues is, of course, between the changes that were made in COVID and the changes that have been phased in over the years for various, and again, there are various kinds of remote work. There's a distinction in the federal government between remote work and, say, telework. It's kind of an ancient terminology there, okay. But teleworking, cyber working would be just slightly younger, are considered actual different categories because the federal government is enormous and many hundreds of thousands of people work for the federal government. And there are different arrangements for many of them. It's not just the president and a couple of people running around with clipboards. Anyway, so when you order everybody to come back to work, one of the problems that they have to plan for is where are we going to put everybody? Because a long time ago, even pre-COVID, when we figured out that we could give people flexible schedules and they could telework some 5 days a week, some 2 days a week, some 3 days a week, we could rotate people and their schedules and accommodate them in a lot less office space, i.e. a lot less costly office space. And so now everybody has to go back to work and the federal government has to scramble in this economy to find more office space, like in the next 30 days, for hundreds of thousands of more people who really don't need to be coming in and don't want to be coming in and are going to be driving their cars and are going to be looking for places to park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, a giant why don't you justism problem just waiting to happen, except why wait? Why not start? On the other hand, there's also more why don't you justism going on at the VA in particular. And I guess this is a good illustration of just how vapid the whole system of Donald Trump's executive orders kind of thing is. We were talking about the executive order on grocery prices. I don't know how to bring down grocery prices. I hereby order somebody else to figure out how to bring down grocery prices. That was the net result of that memo. And I saw the other day on Blue Sky, and I'll have to go and find it, there's a fun new account out there called Leopards Eating Faces, right? I think that did I mention that yesterday? All right. Well, at any rate, I'll first of all, I'll go and find it and I'll give you the actual real name of the feed. But I think that's it. But Leopards ate my face. Leopards ate my face at, .bluesky.social if you're on Blue Sky and you want to follow along, and collect these stories, and some of them better than others. But the one that caught my eye the other day, when it caught my eye, I was like, well, okay, that's kind of funny, but I feel like there's something weird about this one. And here it is. Okay, so this is captured from maybe Twitter or whatever, screen capped and brought over. It's got an image attached, which is a big, like a picture of a mock-up of a red ink stamp on a white page, like a rubber stamp, and it says, "We need your help." So that's supposed to grab the eye. Whose eye is it supposed to grab? Trump's and Ted Cruz. Did we... I don't know. I don't remember whether we read this one aloud yesterday or whether I just read this aloud to somebody at home. But attention, please help, POTUS, Trump, and Senator Ted Cruz. My wife is a nurse and was recently hired by the VA. Did we do this yesterday? Our home was packed up. We have a new home. We spent thousands to move our family from Fort Worth to Waco. Following Trump's hiring freeze executive order, the VA rescinded her job offer. My wife is in tears and inconsolable, and my family is devastated. It's been my wife's dream, right? I think we did do this one, to work with needy disabled veterans. I'm a disabled vet. He's boo-hooing about the whole thing. And we are huge Trump supporters, and I know this was an unintended consequence. Maybe yes, maybe no. At any rate, the feeling I started to get after reading that, at first was like, oh, just figures that this would happen to somebody, and then they'd start whining about it. But I started to get the feeling that it was sort of maybe like a setup, like let's have one of our guys do this boo-hoo story and call on President Trump personally to intervene on behalf of this guy and his wife. And then President Trump can magnanimously, run the TikTok savior play and swoop in and undo this whole thing. Well, it wasn't quite that direct, and you could have coordinated with Trump calling somebody, Stephen Miller, on the phone, and have Stephen Miller on the other end pretend to be this guy, and, oh, thank you, Mr. President. Or you could have Trump playing both parts, and it's John Barron on the other end. Mr. President, thank you so much. You're so wonderful. You're the greatest person I've ever met in my entire life. You're welcome, John, and I'm glad to know you. It's good to talk to a federal employee. Thank you very much. I'm glad it was good to talk to a federal employee. You could play it out that way. Well, anyway, in the news today, from Federal News Network, a service of the local all-news radio station here, WTOP, in addition to the Everybody Returned to Work story, which I should grab something from, there's this story about the VA specifically. Remember now, the executive order is hiring freeze, I think, across government. But then they started to say, well, with some certain exemptions, like we'll make a few exceptions, like maybe this guy, right? But instead, what we have is the VA has, here's the headline, VA exempts 300,000 healthcare positions from government-wide hiring freeze. Wow. Well, does the Doge have anything to say about that? There's government efficiency for you, right? It's a hiring freeze across the entire government, except for 300,000 workers at the VA. Now, at other departments, are they going to start making exceptions too? Yes. How many healthcare positions does the VA have? And I think the answer is 400,000. So 3/4 of the VA's workforce is exempt from the hiring freeze right off the bat, which, is, again, another stunt, right? I'm going to institute a government-wide hiring freeze. Don't do a hiring freeze. Psst, we don't want it to be, the whole thing to collapse. Because, of course, people will say, that's crazy. The government is going to collapse. Government services are going to fall apart. People are going to start finding out very quickly. All right, don't do it. But, no press conference about don't do it. Anyway, at least it's in the news. Jory Heckman reported it for Federal News Network. The Department of Veterans Affairs is exempting more than 300,000. And I mean, on the one hand, shame on you, you government efficiency people. On the other hand, thank God you're not going to actually submit to your own why don't you just-ism. But again, boo-hoo for us, there's no headline that says, by the way, Greg Dworkin has decided that this is all...
That's bullshit.
Exactly. VA doctors, nurses, and pharmacists and medical officers are among the dozens of occupations excluded from the hiring freeze. Acting VA Secretary... Oh, I didn't realize we had an acting. I guess so. Acting VA Secretary Todd Hunter. We don't have anybody confirmed there yet. In a memo to department leaders, stated Veterans Health Administration positions critical to delivering care to veterans... Golly, that's clarifying, are exempt from the freeze under the category of public safety. Military Times first reported on the memo before its public release on Thursday. The VA memo exempts roughly 3/4 of VHA's approximately 400,000 employee workforce. So, far-reaching, all-of-government effort, obviously. Multiple individuals, however, have told Federal News Network that they have had final job offers rescinded for VA healthcare positions since Trump ordered the hiring freeze and are not sure if the department will reverse course after issuing the memo. Again, it's not so simple, right? A hiring freeze across the board. No, it's going to ruin our healthcare. All right, hiring freeze across the board except for the healthcare guys over at the VA. Okay, but what about me? I have a final job offer. I'm supposed to start Monday. hiring freeze across the federal government except for the 300,000 health workers and that guy. What about me? I have one too. And that guy. All right, everybody who's got a final job offer. So that's the hiring freeze. Everybody who works here still works here. And everybody we just were hiring and was going to be subject to a hiring freeze, you're unfrozen. But after that, after we hire all the people that we were going to hire, then we're going to have a freeze after that. Okay. Super efficient. And let's do it piecemeal, why don't we? HR will also work to reinitiate postings and move forward on any other hiring actions for occupations which are now exempt, the memo states. One job applicant said her final job offer for a nurse position was rescinded by the VA on Wednesday, but reinstated on Thursday. And the reason, of course, is because the executive orders are not thought out, and they're not written correctly, and they're not written out. It doesn't say what the F you're supposed to do. They are why don't you justism documents made real. And the reason you don't do the things that why don't you justism wants you to do is because everything's complicated. And if you want to have a hiring freeze, really, all these things are supposed to be discussed with other people in the government. I had a very interesting conversation last night, just sort of explaining what was going on. And that Trump generally, we've had this discussion before here on the show, that Trump basically just has kind of a childlike understanding of the government and the presidency, or at the very least, somebody who's not particularly inquisitive and has never dealt with the government, although he has. I mean, he's taken plenty of government money. But anyway, if you're just kind of casually watching the news and the president comes on television and makes an announcement of a new policy, that policy very shortly thereafter begins to happen. And if you don't have to know about how government works and you never try and find out how government works, unless you're the president, in which case you're supposed to try and find out, you might think that the president is so powerful, and it is a very powerful position, no doubt about it. But the president is so powerful that when he goes on TV and announces a policy, everybody hops to it and executes the policy. But the reason that a normal president is able to announce a policy and then you begin to see policy changes enacted on the ground is that well before the president basically withholds this announcement until there can be internal discussions across all of government. How will we formulate the policy? What sort of exemptions do we have to make? Top to bottom, how is this going to affect everybody? Think it through, game it out. Let's have discussions, interdepartmental discussions, so that all of government knows what the impact of this announcement is going to be. And once that's settled and workshopped and the aides at all levels have worked it out and everybody knows what's going to go on and all the principal, deputy, assistant, administrators of all the affected departments know what's up, then the president goes and makes the announcement. And the reason it happens at all and happens quickly after the president announces it is because that's sort of the last stop. The government has done all the work, and now the president guy makes the announcement, and then things happen. But Trump just knows about, I saw an announcement, and then things happen. So I can do it the same way. No preparatory work whatsoever. And why doesn't the president just announce this thing? And also, for people who also think that everything is too convoluted and it's stupid and it's got codicils and addendum and this exemption and that exemption and all sorts of processes for appeals, et cetera, is because people know that weird complications that nobody else thought of, except for people who've experienced them before, will happen. You have those people discuss those things, and that's why policy comes out, it's announced. This is the broad intent of the policy, but there will be all sorts of weird exemptions, and you have to know what's going on and know where to look and read the Code of Federal Regulations. And there's been a comment period on the whole thing, so people who are interested in it and need to know about it do know about it, or they know where they can turn to find out about it. But I know everybody who thinks, every government policy it's so stupid and legalese and nerdy and there's twists and turns everywhere. It's because they do these things ahead of time and they write the policy the policy is kind of full of holes, but these are holes that are going to be punched in the policy eventually. You can either do it in orderly fashion beforehand, or you can just announce it by tweet while you're sitting on Air Force One and everybody scrambles, and then we got to have exemptions invented after the fact and have people who were hired by the government and have moved towns, allegedly anyway, and bought a new house and put kids in new schools, only to find out they were hired on Wednesday, fired on Thursday, rehired on Friday, though. You got to put them through this panic rather than, if you want to do things this way. But Trump, just doesn't realize that this happens behind the scenes. So there we go. So we have an executive order signed Monday. By Wednesday, everybody's in a panic. They told me they would be, this is the word of the job applicant nurse here. One applicant said her final job offer, was rescinded on Wednesday, reinstated Thursday. They told me they would be able to hire me and keep my start date. It's been an emotional couple of days, but it looks like everything is working out. But the HR reps are definitely working overtime. Uh-oh. Does Doge know they're working overtime? President Donald Trump, in an executive order signed Monday, included several exemptions, including one for veterans' benefits. But he didn't tell anybody what. Under President Trump, the VA will always do what's necessary, says the media affairs person that's assigned to this. But apparently it didn't work out that well. And by the way, he's supposed to have experience with this. This is his second term, right? The VA made its healthcare workforce exempt from the first Trump administration's hiring freeze in 2017. There's another story floating out there that's just like this, or at least is very similar in that the Trump administration has had this problem before. They did it last time. He didn't remember between terms, or at least not the responsible people. They didn't remember, oh yeah, hiring freeze. We needed exemptions. We did this once before, though.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, beliefs, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everybody could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together. And by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com. Secure, recurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show in the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're exempt from the hiring freeze here at the Kagro in the Morning, so that's good news. Yeah, I mean, this is, mundane stuff, I guess, unless, of course, you're one of the people who have had your job offer rescinded. But, how fascinating to find out they actually made the same mistake. Pardon me, where's my golden voice? Same mistake in 2017. Which you could chalk up to being a rookie error, I suppose. But then to be reelected, and of course to be reelected on the promise not only of, retribution, which I guess, everything else is out the window when you make that your platform. But we're not going to screw it up this time. And a lot of people worried, even opponents of Trump, saying, well, it's going to be worse this time because they know how things work this time. They'll be more effective in making mischief. And I'm sure in some areas that's got to turn out to be true. But we're also reminded these people are enormously incompetent. And they're vindictive, and they don't want to learn anything. They don't want to be told anything. They don't want to they don't want to learn the ropes of how to do the things that they do. They just want to blurt them out And, maybe they don't really even care about actually doing the things that they say they want to do. They just want to threaten the things that they say they want to do so that people will be scared of them. That could be part of it too. But who knows what their plans are. But again, the VA went through this in 2017. Trump administration imposes a hiring freeze. The VA says we can't do it. It doesn't work like that. And then boom, healthcare workforce exempt in 2017. Come back in, VA healthcare. No, I want a hiring freeze. Do you remember that the whole thing was effed up and you had to exempt all of the healthcare workers at the VA last time? Remember, what is that even? Person, woman, man, TV, camera. I have great memory. All right, wonderful. So you can remember the words man, woman, person. Look out. That's difficult to put together as a mnemonic. And then, of course, TV and camera. Well, gee whiz. Basically, what do you see immediately around you right now, sir? Man, woman, person, TV, camera. Okay. Great memory. Anyway, just seeing the same mistakes made over and over again, it should remind you of the incompetence of these people. But, of course, they don't care and they're enormously cruel people. And so it's not going to be good for anybody. And we're not going to get away with anything, I don't think. They may have enough people who say, all right, well, if that's wrong, we'll try this one. Or have judges that say, that was wrong last time, but it's right this time. There's always that. Back to this article quickly. Former Representative Doug Collins of Georgia, Trump's nominee to run the VA, so they replaced the acting guy, didn't make an explicit assurance to lawmakers at his confirmation hearing that the department would grant those same carve-outs this time around, because he's got no idea. I don't know. That's another of the problems just between the other people working in government at top levels and the president. You think that the policy is either going in this direction or maybe even has been decided in this direction, but Trump changes his mind and tweets out something else. Just as yesterday we found out that the January 6th pardons were worked out in a much more limited fashion, and then at the last minute Trump said, nah, F it, release everybody, and they had to scramble to write an order, and nobody knows what the order means because nobody knew what the first order meant to begin with, and then they scrambled and wrote a new one, and they have no idea what the shakeout of this is. Everybody's got a general pardon. It doesn't, is it for January 6th crimes only? Is plotting to murder the people who are working your case in your January 6th case a January 6th related crime? Is that covered? No one knows. Same thing here, I guess, in a much more mundane fashion at the VA. The incoming nominee doesn't know what the policy is going to be. I don't know what the policy is going to be, but all I know is whatever dear leader says I should be doing, I'm going to do. So, on the one hand, you should reject me as incompetent to this task. On the other hand, no other nominee is going to say anything other than that. I'm going to do what Trump asks me to do. And that's literally been the answer from some of the high-profile nominees when they ask him, would you do this? Would you follow this? Many people would consider this to be an illegal order, but if the president ordered you to, would you do it? I don't want to engage in hypotheticals. I'm going to do what the president asks. Well, anyway, Doug Collins has no idea, even though he wasn't, he wasn't the VA then, but I guess was he in Congress in 2017? Did he read the news then? Hey, they effed up the hiring freeze, especially at the VA. And I guess he was probably interested in Veterans Affairs at the time, because to now end up as the nominee for VA secretary, presumably, although, again, this is the Trump administration, maybe not. All right, so what did he have to say about this publicly? President Trump in his executive order is to get in this executive order is to get an assessment on where we are with our employees. It's not to take away anything that is currently there, Collins said Tuesday. We may not at this point bring in a new person tomorrow unless needed, but this is where we're at, unless needed. So there's the out. Well, we're not going to take any jobs away from people, but we won't bring any new people in unless we need them, in which case, we'll do that. But I'll give them a report. So there, too, I guess Collins' understanding of the big dramatic executive order. We're having a hiring freeze. The people who are going to be secretaries, at the cabinet level say what that means is I'm supposed to tell them, kind of where we stand and how many people we really need to hire anyway, despite the freeze, and then he'll exempt them. Good freeze. Members of the Senate VA committee raised concerns about the hiring freeze at Tuesday's hiring. At Tuesday's hiring. I think they mean hearing on that one. And whether the Trump administration would pursue cuts to the VA's workforce. The committee advanced Collins' nomination in an 18-1 vote on Thursday. Committee ranking member Richard Blumenthal said he would support Collins' nomination, but added that he has really intense concerns about the hiring freeze. Okay. What does Blumenthal have to say? Whatever the effects on other departments or agencies, all of you know how dire the need is for doctors, nurses, attendants, everyone involved in the VA healthcare system. There's openings now. They need to be filled, particularly for mental health care. Delaying these medical appointments and benefits, in some of these cases, denial of those benefits because health is such an urgent need for many of our veterans, particularly our older veterans. I don't know if that quote actually hangs together entirely, but you get the sense of it. The VA memo states all jobs not exempt from the hiring freeze must be pulled from usajobs.gov, where you would go to find listings, and other websites no later than January 21st at 5 p.m. So that has come and gone. As of Thursday afternoon, the VA advertised 139 vacant positions on usajobs.gov. The VA, however, reported that more than 40,000 vacancies were in existence at the end of 2024. House VA committee ranking member Mark Takano of California joined House Democrats in asking the department's leadership for more details about the hiring freeze's impact on the workforce and whether it would ask the Office of Personnel Management for more exemptions. No one at the White House even stopped to consider that freezing hiring for veterans health care providers or veterans claims processors might be a bad idea, said Takano in a statement on Thursday. You get the idea. A spokeswoman for the House VA committee said Chairman Mike Bost, B-O-S-T, Republican of Illinois, fully supports the Trump administration's exemptions for the VA hiring freeze to ensure that healthcare services are not impacted for veterans. Okay, sure. Well, we'll have a hiring freeze, but won't that impact things that you like? Yes, those are exempt. How? With an exemption. Okay, and that's the big order, and that's the way it is behind most of these orders. WTOP, Federal News Radio, blah, 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 I don't know, whatever. They have a new division. It's not even that new. Has more on it from the OPM standpoint, Office of Personnel Management, and I guess I'm going to have to reload everything. But this has to do with the remote work and the different categories of these things. And, again, just a reminder that there's no such thing as one kind of remote work. I'm ending remote work. Well, what do you mean? Use the terminology so that people know. I know it makes you sound like a nerd, but, too bad. OPM directs agencies to quickly comply with Trump's return to the office mandate. Agencies, the subheader tells us, should aim for a 30-day deadline to implement Trump's return to office executive order, according to a memo from the Office of Personnel Management. Drew Friedman wrote this one for Federal News Network. Agencies have until the end of the day, Friday, today, to revise their telework policies and begin ordering federal employees to work on-site full-time, according to a return-to-office memo from the Office of Personnel Management on Wednesday evening. OPM is recommending agencies target a 30-day deadline to be in full compliance with the return-to-office directive Trump signed in his first day on office. The executive order told agencies to return their federal employees to work at the office. Ready for this one? More iron fist dictatorship as soon as practicable. Well, what if that's 2030? The order also called for agencies to end remote work arrangements, that's the quote, and require employees to work in person full-time while leaving room for some exemptions. I can't believe it. OPM's latest memo offers further details on Trump's initial executive order. Since the order only referenced remote work arrangements, because that's what makes Trump angry. Remote, I don't understand this remote. Because it referenced only, quote, remote work arrangements and not telework arrangements, different in the federal government, the January 20th directive led to some initial confusion. Can you believe it? The executive order is quite unclear in terms of exactly what it's covering, because it does use the term remote work. Max Stier, I'm going to guess S-T-I-E-R, president and CEO of the Partnership for Public Service, told reporters during a press conference on Tuesday. For the federal workforce, telework and remote work are two distinct types of work arrangements for federal employees. Generally, federal employees with telework agreements are expected to report to their, quote, official duty stations, unquote, on a, quote, regular and recurring basis. Okay, so what does that mean? 3 days in, 2 days out, every week, something like that. Telework. Remote agreements for federal employees let employees work from an, quote, alternative work site. And remote employees are generally not expected to report to work on site at an agency. That could mean working from home. That could mean working from Starbucks. That could mean working from a remote work office center somewhere else, just in a different city or nearby or different part of Washington, D.C. that's easier to reach by metro, whatever it is. OPM's memo now calls for a full return to in-person work for a majority of currently teleworking federal employees. Agencies and federal supervisors can, you'll never believe it, grant exemptions to the return to office mandate for individuals with a disability, a qualifying medical condition, or another, quote, compelling reason, the memo states. Just not DEI, I guess. That's not allowed. Additionally, employees who are located more than 50 miles away from an agency office should be designated to, quote, the most appropriate agency office based on the employee's duties and job function, unquote, the memo states. OPM's memo also tells agencies to submit their expected date for being in full compliance with the return to office directive. Agencies should notify all employees of Trump's return to office mandate and have their telework managing officers oversee compliance with the guidance. The actual implementation of the mandate will likely vary by agency, but some agencies, such as the Department of Homeland Security, have already announced return to office directives for their teleworking employees as a result of Trump's order this week. Okay. And I also have seen already on Blue Sky more boohoo stories about that, including I know somebody who says that, somebody, I think I don't even know if I noted it or retweeted it, but just I guess I could search for it. But I have a Trumpy coworker, a woman in this person's office, who was in tears today because her husband is a federal employee and he's ordered to return to the office every day, and now she's going to have to quit her job and stay home with the kids. Apparently, I don't know why, 2 salaries. They don't have any other child care possibilities, but I guess that's the case, or at least temporarily. And boo-hooing about the whole thing and how unfair it is. And anyway, you voted for the guy. You're going to have to live with it. I don't know whether it's going to pan out that way or you'll just be subject to another exemption. Or then again, there may in fact be, maybe you assign Doge, okay, my version of government efficiency. What I think of as government efficiency is you fish around on social media for accounts of people who say they're huge Trump fans and they are adversely affected by this thing and will grant exemptions on a person-by-person basis. Couldn't be bothered to do that with the pardons, of course, but maybe we'll do this as a PR stunt. But instead, I think they'll just end up saying hiring freeze, except not a hiring freeze. By the way, as far as statistics go, currently 54% of the federal workforce works entirely on site due to the needs of their jobs. The problem with this, and the reason we're getting rid of this thing, and I'm going to have an executive order for return to work, is all the government employees are lazy and they're staying home and cashing their paychecks and doing no work. Well, 54% of federal workforce is on site 5 days a week all the time, always has been. Telework eligible federal employees comprise about 46% of the federal workforce. That's nothing to sneeze at, right? but they are spending an average of 60% of their work hours in person anyway. Those are basically the people who are in 3 days a week, out 2 days a week. They're working from an alternative location, whether that's home or somewhere else, but they're in 3 days a week as it is. Not, they're on vacation, they're in the Bahamas cashing their checks. Nothing like that. According, about 10% of federal employees work entirely remotely. Again, 10% is not nothing, but once again, he's heard a horror story from somebody. And there was a guy, and he's in Europe, and he's playing in the casinos at Monaco, cashing his check. No, usually not the case. And yet, here he is setting federal policy based on something like that. So, all right, there's more very, very boring detail in here. But if you are a federal worker and you want to check in on it, you probably likely know about Federal News Network already. And I would recommend that you take a look. There are other stories, though, that this is connected to in terms of just sloppy executive order work and why don't you just isms all over the place and mistakes being made over and over again. Let's see. Well, I should go back to this one because this one reminded me of something specific as we were just reading it. Oh, right. Just getting basic facts about things wrong. That I think I'll find over in Blue Sky. I just saw this one yesterday, and I don't think did I put the story aside? I'm not sure. Pocket is such a jumble these days. And, of course, if you're grabbing things from Blue Sky, there's no label. But, oh, yes, here it is. Okay, we do have it. I got the New York Times article on this one. But the commentary to follow on Blue Sky was something. All right, so here's the story. Among the pardons, and that's a story all by itself, the fact that Donald Trump is doing pardons on day 1, 2, 3 of his presidency is really something remarkable. The ordinary pattern for normal people and normal presidents is certainly the controversial pardons don't get done until the very end. It's sort of a known thing now, the flurry of pardons on the way out the door, because, if they're doing controversial pardons or difficult pardons, they are doing them at the moment where there's really not going to be any more repercussions for them. There'll be a few days of stories about, I can't believe you did this one, but I'm not the president anymore. Go focus on the guy who is. To do this flurry of pardons at the beginning is something new for us. So if you thought the January 6th pardons weren't bad enough, how about I share a different set of pardons for you? Trump pardons 2 D.C. police officers convicted in a fatal chase and cover-up. And here we're talking about, you'll never believe it, a young black man by the name of, is it Caron, K-A-R-O-N. I mean, I'm tempted to say Karen, but it's a young black man, and Caron Hilton Brown, H-Y-L-T-O-N -Brown, killed by one of these police officers who was pardoned, and the other, I guess, wasn't involved in the direct killing, but helped in covering up that killing. But again, just another message to his MAGA troops that, cops who kill young black men who then get convicted of a crime for having done it, well, I'm going to spring them. And it was interesting because the D.C. police force had to deal at the same time and in the same public statement about how they felt about pardons being issued to January 6th insurrectionists who attacked police officers, but also how they felt about letting some of their own police officers off the hook for having killed a suspect. And they're like, well, that one's bad and these are good. Surprising no one, but this is sort of an interesting case. The death of a young black man, Caron Hilton Brown, led to days of protest in 2020, not long after the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. So the timing was terrible, to say the very least. Zolan Cano-Youngs is the reporter on this piece. President Trump on Wednesday issued a full and unconditional pardon to 2 Washington, D.C. police officers convicted after a chase that killed a young black man in 2020, an episode that led to days of protests and clashes in the nation's capital, as you might expect, right? Mr. Trump granted clemency to Officer Terrence Sutton of the Metropolitan Police Department, who was sentenced last year to more than 5 years in prison for second-degree murder and obstruction of justice in the unauthorized pursuit, by the way, which killed the man, 20-year-old Caron Hilton Brown. Officer Sutton was the first D.C. police officer to be convicted of murder for actions on duty. The other pardon recipient, Lieutenant Andrew Zabavsky, was sentenced to 4 years in prison, not directly for the killing of Mr. Hilton Brown, but for conspiring with Mr. Sutton to cover up the deadly police chase. The two had been free pending the outcome of their appeals. That's important for just note that. Issuing pardons was not the first high-profile act of clemency during Mr. Trump's first week in his term, and was one that now involves him in a case that incited backlash against police department operating just outside the White House. 2 days after he issued clemency to all of the nearly 1,600 people charged in connection with the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, including some accused of assaulting or impeding law enforcement officers, Mr. Trump used his power to give a reprieve to the officers convicted in Mr. Hilton Brown's death. On Tuesday, he had hinted at the pardons, which prevent any punishment associated with the convictions. Ready? And right in here, this is his comment, okay? So remember what I told you a minute ago and that you need to keep in mind. One of them was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the murder. One sentenced to 4 years in prison for the cover-up, but that they were both free pending their appeals. They're free. This is Trump's description of what he's done with these pardons. They were arrested, put in jail for 5 years because they went after an illegal, Trump said on Tuesday. And I guess something happened where something went wrong. And they arrested the 2 officers and put them in jail for going after a criminal. So stop for a second and realize the overall picture I want you to take away from this is he's just issued clemency to 2 people involved in a murder who were police officers meant to protect and serve, but they instead murdered somebody and got convicted for it, right? And he says, I'm pardoning them, which would be a thing that I guess I could come to understand. Well, certainly under different circumstances, I guess I could understand. It depends what these circumstances, no. But particularly this circumstance, the president has no effing idea whatsoever what went on here. And it's implicit in the statement. I guess they went after somebody. I guess something happened where something went wrong. Anyway, I pardon them. Like, he has little to no idea what this is and why he's pardoning them. Ordinarily, I think, he saw something on Fox News and they said, and isn't it a tragedy that these police officers in the performance of their duty protecting America are being victimized now, right? But I don't think it even rises to that. I really would love to have an investigation into the mechanics of how this happened. I'm starting to think this one in particular is that these cops' attorneys is connected in some way or found his way to somebody who could get in Trump's ear, like, I don't know, a Stephen Miller type person who could get in his ear and say, oh, Mr. Trump, this is a great tragedy. These police officers are in a performance of their duty. They were going after an illegal and something happened. The guy died. He fell on the train tracks. I don't know. And then they're like, oh, yeah, you murdered him. And the D.C. jury, because, they're all blah people, as Rick Santorum would say. And it was unfair, and they were convicted, and they really shouldn't have been, and you need to get them out. They were sentenced to 5 years in prison. Now, they didn't serve any of those 5 years. That's another important thing. They were arrested and put in jail for 5 years, just like with the January 6th defendants in many cases. Those people were held unfairly. They lost years of their lives, wasted their lives in jail, and a lot of them were in prison. That's true, having been convicted, and a lot of them were not released pending trial because they were so dangerous, but most of them were. including Edward Kelly, who we keep mentioning over and over again, who plotted to kill the FBI officers working his case while he was out on release pending trial. But here, yeah, they weren't in jail for 5 years. They were sentenced, but they were walking around free while they waited for their appeal to work itself out. And then, yeah, some things happened. There's a factual narrative to the case, but instead we get, I guess something happened where something went wrong. Yeah, they murdered a guy. I guess something happened where something went wrong, and they arrested these two officers and put them in jail. They did not. For going after a criminal. Now, earlier he says they went after an illegal. Now, the next paragraph notes helpfully, in fact, Mr. Hilton Brown was an American citizen, said David L. Schertz, a lawyer representing the Hilton Brown estate, and it was the police officers, not Mr. Hilton Brown, who were found to have committed a crime that amounted to, quote, a disservice to the community and the thousands of officers who work incredibly hard within the bounds of the Constitution to keep us safe. Matthew M. Graves, then the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, said in a statement when the officers were sentenced in September. So they went after a criminal. He wasn't a criminal. Was he a suspect? Well, to these cops, yes. A suspect for what? I don't even know. I don't remember the story. We should find out. But, usually it's something you're not supposed to kill somebody for doing. And they probably, in all likelihood, were wrong about their suspicions. But you see the story he tells the newspaper? Not only does he not know what the hell happened here, but he says they were put in jail for going after an illegal, i.e. that it's an immigration case, and so therefore the murder is fine. And it's not, even if it was an immigration case, but it wasn't even that. He's got every piece of this story wrong, and he's handing out presidential clemency nonetheless. And I think that this is just, last person to have his ear. And sir, sign this. And that's it. All he just goes ahead and does it. The D.C. Police Union, which had expressed dismay over the January 6th pardons, praised Mr. Trump's decision on clemency, I'm late on the music, for the two officers as righting an incredible wrong. Okay. In October of 2020, as the nation was still reeling from the protests after the murder of George Floyd, months earlier in Minneapolis, Officer Sutton and Lieutenant Zabavsky spotted Mr. Hilton Brown. Oh, you know what? Now the music fooled me, but I'll have to do it after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We entered back a little bit late. Try and give the editor some room to play around to get this right for the podcast. But yes, so we were just getting around to the section of the story in which we find out what was it that motivated these fine officers to make a summary execution on the streets. And it wasn't a gun incident. It's definitely an unfortunate accident, but it's very clearly one of those things that doesn't happen but for this apparently unauthorized chase. So setting the scene, this is a couple of months after the George Floyd killing and murder and protest. And at this point, Officer Sutton and Lieutenant Zabavsky spotted Mr. Hilton Brown driving a moped on a sidewalk while not wearing a helmet. So they were concerned for his safety. But yeah, you're not supposed to be driving your mopeds on the sidewalk. That's certainly true. Let's kill him. Mr. Hilton Brown ignored Officer Sutton's attempt to stop him and drove off, prosecutors in the case said. Officer Sutton chased Mr. Hilton Brown for 10 blocks, including at one point by driving the wrong way on a one-way street. This might be a little overzealous in the pursuit here. He pursued Mr. Hilton Brown into a narrow alley, turned off his vehicle's emergency lights and sirens, some reason, and accelerated. When Mr. Hilton Brown exited the alley, he was then hit by another vehicle, according to prosecutors. As Mr. Hilton Brown lay unconscious in the street in a pool of his own blood, Sutton and Zabavsky agreed to cover up what Sutton had done to prevent any further investigation of the incident, according to the September statement. And I'm not certain what it was that concerned them so, except, one, that there's probably we should read on, I guess. There's probably standing orders against vehicle pursuits, driving the wrong way down, if you're trying to prevent the assassination of the president, well, if you're trying to prevent the assassination of the president, a bank robbery, a murder, I don't know, driving the wrong way down the road, maybe not for a bank robbery, but I don't know, something that involves life and death, moped riding without a helmet, I thought you guys were against helmet laws and thought of MAGA against, this is a victimless crime. But let's find a victim here. Let's murder the guy and then there'll be a victim. And then, of course, turning off the emergency lights and sirens when you're driving under those conditions, you're supposed to use those things to alert the suspect that he's supposed to stop. Fine, he's not paying any attention to that. But alerting everybody else, I'm driving the wrong way down a one-way street, I'm driving through an alley, look out, there's something dangerous coming your way, be alert so you don't accidentally get killed yourself. And he says, screw it, we don't really need that. So, what? What would you do that for? This is giving me a headache, I'm turning these off. These are solely for my convenience? No. All right. So then they decide they're going to have this cover up. The officers allowed the driver who hit Mr. Hilton Brown to leave the scene 20 minutes after the collision. Prosecutor said Officer Sutton was accused of driving over the crash debris, and both officers were accused of misleading a commanding officer about the severity of the crash. Lieutenant Zabavsky falsely implied that Mr. Hilton Brown had been drunk. According to prosecutors, the fatal crash prompted days of occasionally volatile protests outside a police station in Washington. Mr. Schertz, the lawyer for Mr. Hilton Brown's relatives, accused Mr. Trump of pardoning the officers at the behest of police unions. That could be it too, right? If you're going to do this January 6th thing, throw us a bone on that. Maybe. The Metropolitan Police Department released a statement thanking Mr. Trump, quote, for supporting our officers, sometimes. Never before in any other jurisdiction in the country has a police officer been charged with second-degree murder for pursuing a suspect. Gee, that describes exactly what went on. The department said in a statement, these members could never have imagined that engaging in a core function of their job would be prosecuted as a crime. J. Michael Hannon, Officer Sutton's lawyer, said in an interview that he anticipated the U.S. attorney would request the courts to vacate the guilty verdict against Officer Sutton and dismiss the indictment because he has always been an innocent man, except for the time that he spent convicted of murder. Christopher Zampogna, perhaps, Zampogna, Zampogna, representing Lieutenant Zabavsky, said in a statement that his client, quote, thanks President Donald J. Trump for his decision to grant him a full and unconditional pardon. And that's it. Say very little. Take the pardon and run. But now the question will be, is J. Michael Hannon connected? Is Christopher Zampogna connected? Did the police union make a trade? I'd just be curious to find out. But yeah, that's some way of putting it too. Never did they think that they would be charged with second-degree murder for pursuing a suspect. How about for pursuing a suspect in the middle of a crowded city for a relatively minor offense after turning the wrong way down a one-way street and then into an alley and then turning off your sirens and lights so that, had you had the sirens and lights on, maybe the driver that hit him when he came out of the alley would have been going slower because I hear sirens and lights. And it sounds like they're coming from out of this alley. I better watch out what the hell's going on here. And then, this accident doesn't happen. But of course, totally disingenuous to say, I can't believe they're being sentenced to prison for doing their job. Well, for doing their job wrong and having it kill somebody and intentionally doing their job wrong. Why do you turn off the lights? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Trump knows nothing about it. I guess something went wrong and it resulted in a second-degree murder conviction. There's clearly no way for me to find out what went wrong. There's no record of it, I'm sure, right? Anyway, I just thought that was interesting and telling, to say the least. I have another story about also not paying any goddamn attention to anything. Remember that we started off the show talking about the VA having to exempt 3/4 of its workforce from hiring freeze executive orders because dumbness. But it also happened that it was institutional failure of memory. They did this in 2017. They effed it up the same way. They did it again in 2025, and they're shocked to find out, we screwed up again. We made the same mistake. Well, here's another same mistake for you. I thought this was an interesting one. And here, I know there are very much more pressing issues that we could and should be discussing, but this is cleanup, batting cleanup on the flood of information of bad acts. So you get it from top to bottom here, the smaller things too. Trump's pick for EU, European Union ambassador, is another man with a controversial past, says the 19th News. And that, I think, kind of tongue-in-cheek, I would guess. The 19th, well, of course, they know very well what the controversial past is, but a little wink here about what that is. This is Andrew Puzder, P-U-Z-D-E-R. Is it Puzder? Puzder? I have no idea how you pronounce that. And I said, that name rings a bell. Andrew Puzder, a former restaurant industry executive, whatever, had also been Trump's first pick for labor secretary in 2017. That would have made at least a little bit more sense. He hires laborers in a restaurant, but restaurant industry executive. But in 2017, he was picked for labor secretary, but backed out after spousal abuse accusations resurfaced. And now, of course, the headline is he's picked for ambassador to the EU, and now they're reviewing his record, and they're like, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. Didn't you nominate him in 2017, and he had to back out because of spousal abuse accusations? Yes. Well, did he unabuse his spouse in the time since 2017? It's not something you can do. He's abused the spouse. That's a matter of fact, and we're stuck with it. It's history now. Did you remember that when you nominated him? I remember it now. That's not going to work. President Donald Trump picked Andrew Puzder, who withdrew from a cabinet nomination in Trump's first term. A cabinet nomination. It's not even like one of those stupid commissions or something. Anyway, withdrew from cabinet nomination in Trump's first term after spousal abuse allegations surfaced. Now has been picked as ambassador to the European Union, where it's okay to abuse your spouse, presumably. Trump nominated Puzder, the former chief executive of CKE Restaurants, right? He's in the restaurant industry. Like I'm a clown. I'm in show business. Nah, I'm in the restaurant industry. All right. CKE Restaurants is the parent company of Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. Remember now? No, okay. To be the labor secretary in 2017. I remember this too. And saying, as fast food restaurants go, some of the worst. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Carl's Jr. Brought to you by Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. Anyway, he wasn't brought to us by Carl's Jr. last time because he was a spousal abuser. And nothing has changed. He's already ordered the spousal abuse combo meal, and there's nothing we can do about it. He called him at the time, of course, a successful attorney, businessman, economic commentator, and author when announcing the nomination the new time around on Wednesday on Truth Social. Puzder is the latest second-term Trump nominee who has faced allegations of sexual misconduct, harassment, or gender-based violence. That's the specialty there. We're reading about the 19th News. Gender-based issues among their many beats, of course. The position of U.S. ambassador to the European Union is subject to Senate approval. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Shortly after his nomination, news outlets resurfaced a 2004 lawsuit that they did in 2017 as well, that accused Puzder of sexually discriminating against, harassing, and wrongfully terminating Caroline Leakin, a former CKE vice president of investor relations. The lawsuit appears to have been settled out of court, Capitol in Maine, reported at the time, with the company and Leakin citing a confidentiality agreement, of course, in not discussing the case. Separately, in the late 1980s, this is a while ago, Puzder's ex-wife Lisa Henning, now Lisa Firestein, filed documents alleging physical abuse, including beatings around the neck and body, as part of her 1987 divorce from Puzder. Pudzer? Now he's Pudzer in this one. I think he's Puzder. And that's a typo, but that's kind of funny. And you want to call him Pudzer for one reason or another. She dropped the charges as part of a child custody agreement in 1990 and signed a legal document saying all allegations of abuse of any kind were made in the context of divorce proceedings. I fully withdraw these allegations. Not that they didn't happen. I just withdraw them because I got my way in the custody fight. And sometimes you have to do these things. In 2017, Politico reported that Firestein spoke about her claims of abuse in a 1990 episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show entitled High Class Battered Women. I get what they're going for here. It happens to everybody, and that was an important thing to tell people. It's just kind of a weird way of titling the show, but it's correct. Firestein, appearing in disguise and under a pseudonym, did not discuss her previous allegations of physical abuse, but spoke about how Pudzer, again, vowed revenge and told her, I will see you in the gutter. This will never be over. You will pay for this. In a statement to Politico at the time, a spokesperson for back to Pudzer and Firestein said the two are close friends today and often spend time together, but really, and none of that context seems to matter to Andy's critics, said the spokesperson, George Thompson. Perpetuating these retracted 30-year-old allegations and an impulsive decision to appear on a talk show is nothing more than a desperate attempt to tarnish Andy Pudzer at the expense of Lisa and their family. Thompson added, sure, whatever. In a letter to the 2017 letter to the committee in charge of the nomination, then Labor, Firestein said she was, quote, caught up in the notion of a free trip to Chicago and being a champion of women and women's issues. I regret my decision to appear on that show, she wrote. I never told Andy about it. Pudzer withdrew his nomination for Labor Secretary one day before he was set to appear at a congressional confirmation hearing. In an interview on Fox Business, Pudzer said, there was never any substance to the abuse. I always denied it. She admitted very shortly after the divorce that they weren't true. And I guess maybe this time they think they can roll the dice on it and come up with a win and send them to the EU. Okay. I'm sure the people in the European Union are anxious to find out the culinary secrets of Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, and he's a lot to share with them. All right. I just thought that was interesting. Like, didn't you make this mistake last time? Yes, but this time spousal abuse is good, actually. So, we got a chance with this one. All right, there's more similar to this one. Let's see. This is a fantastic story. You probably thought I might have led with this one, but I don't know. I got distracted by other ones in the flood of information. But this one grabbed everyone's eyes late yesterday afternoon. The Washington Post, to the extent that it still exists as a newspaper, reports this one. Jacqueline Alemany, is it Alemany? I think we've had her name before, called Alemany. Many, like ale. How many ales do you want? Many. Is it ale? But it's probably Alemany, I'm guessing. Johnson, by which we mean Speaker Johnson, Speaker Mike Johnson of the House of Representatives, a Johnson aide discouraged Hutchinson subpoena. That's Cassidy Hutchinson, the January 6th committee figure, or the Trump White House figure who was questioned by the committee and who told the story of Trump wanting to go to the Capitol after his ellipse speech and possibly fighting with the limo drivers, and that he then sat on the couch and watched and shrugged about doing anything to stop the violence. You remember her. A Johnson aide at some point discouraged a subpoena to Hutchinson in the latter-day Republican investigation of the investigators, right? When they launched Barry Loudermilk's investigation into the real crime, which was investigating the crimes of January 6th by the January 6th committee, he wanted to subpoena Cassidy Hutchinson and press her on her story at some level to bolster his conclusion that the real crime was the investigation. But he was talked out of it by one of Johnson's aides. Why? Over concerns about lawmakers' quote, sexual texts. Oh, Tell me more. The move was intended in part to prevent the release of sexually explicit texts that lawmakers sent Cassidy Hutchinson. I should like some more context on this, sir. Thank you. Well, actually, I'll ask you, ma'am, Jacqueline Alemany. Tell me more about it. Although, quite honestly, I'd like to hear it from Mike Johnson, even though I know he'll lie to me about it. An aide to House Speaker Mike Johnson advised Republican colleagues against subpoenaing former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson as part of their investigation into, this is the way they put it in the paper here, their investigation into the January 6th attack in an effort to prevent the release of, okay, and we've already lost the train here, prevent the release of the sexually explicit texts that lawmakers sent her. But again, we've trying to find the context and finding out that it wasn't really being provided to us correctly has sent us off the rails here. Why are they subpoenaing her? It's not part of their investigation into January 6th. It's part of their investigation into the investigation of January 6th. That will help us put this in context. But at any rate, they're looking to charge people who investigated the people who were charged, though they were also just pardoned, and looking for ways to turn it into, the nonsense version of events that they have always promoted. It was simple tourism. It was a day of love, whatever. So they're investigating the investigators. They want to subpoena Cassidy Hutchinson, but they can't. Why? Mike Johnson's aide tells Loudermilk, don't do it, because if you subpoena her, these texts that lawmakers, that members of the House sent to the witness that are sexual in nature might come to light. This is astonishing. The aide intervened last June, citing concerns that a subpoena could expose the texts, according to the correspondence and the person who spoke on condition of anonymity to talk candidly about private conversations. But pause once again. Once again, we know about sexual misconduct by Republican members of the House of Representatives that they're just not going to talk about. They're just not going to allow to come to the surface. This is like the 19th time that Republican insiders have said, oh yeah, there are Republican members of this House right now who are out here committing all sorts of sexual misconduct. I'm just not going to tell you who they are. But if they ever accuse me of anything, I'm definitely going to spill the beans on those guys. Marjorie Taylor Greene has said it. Matt Gaetz has said it. Madison Cawthorn said it. George Santos said it. They've all been telling everybody who, every time they get themselves in trouble, oh yeah, well, there's lots of perverts around here. I guess there are, but we're not going to help anybody. However, we are going to hunt for transgender people in a bathroom. Sure. All right. I mean, not all right, but there we are. Johnson, by the way, revived the investigation this week, Loudermilk's investigation, as part of an effort by Donald Trump and his allies to seek retribution against perceived political enemies, including those who investigated his role in the Capitol attack, but never mind the perverts. In a meeting following the June conversation, Johnson and senior aides also conveyed to Representative Barry Loudermilk and members of his staff that issuing a subpoena to Hutchinson and asking her to testify under oath would serve as an opportunity for her to retell her story in general, not just the sex stuff, and potentially embarrass the Trump White House, according to two people present for the meeting. I vow retribution. Well, I vow to help you with your retribution. Well, then let's go and do it. No, because as it turns out on our path to retribution, about 600 of us are going to be accused of sexually harassing somebody. Who? The witness that we need in order to show that the whole thing. Oh, my God. Well, why couldn't you guys just keep it in your pants and do the investigation? I mean, I guess they did keep it in their pants. They just texted her. But I mean, what are you doing? I don't want to give these guys any advice on how to do their investigations properly and professionally because, I don't care. They're investigating something that isn't real anyway. But I'm sort of imagining, like, what is it? We don't know. We don't have enough detail to figure out what the hell's going on here. But essentially, we're talking about they're having a hearing. And under what context are they doing this? I don't know. They're having a hearing. When did they text her? But I mean, here, Cassidy Hutchinson is here testifying about possibly one of the most explosive charges in American history, a virtual treasonous insurrection. An actual treasonous insurrection perpetrated by the then sitting president of the United States. And they're receiving testimony about this on Capitol Hill. And the thought bubble over Republican members' heads in this. I could understand if it was like, oh no, they're accusing our president and in fact our entire party of treason. Essentially, we really need to wriggle out of this. We gotta find a way to punch holes in her testimony. But on the other hand, boy is she hot. I wonder if I could bone her later on. Somebody give me her phone number. I'm gonna sext her while she's testifying. As a member of Congress. And apparently it's multiple members. And they're trying to, I guess, gently in newspaper acceptable language, try to describe what's going on here. I got to read you some more because none of this is ruled out. But I mean, I'm imagining what it might have been like, but none of this is ruled out by the facts as reported here. So where were we here? So Johnson's staff tells Loudermilk's staff, don't subpoena Hutchinson, because if you do, somebody might talk about the more than one member of the House that sent sexual text messages to the witness. Loudermilk had publicly floated the idea of issuing a subpoena to Hutchinson, who was elevated to national prominence in an explosive 2022 hearing where she testified that Trump had wanted an armed mob and got the armed mob to march on the Capitol on January 6th, and that he wanted to join them. Now, before that meeting, a Johnson aide told Loudermilk's staff that multiple colleagues had raised concerns with the Speaker's office about the potential for public disclosure of, quote, sexual texts from members who were trying to, and this is a weird phrasing of it, who were trying to engage in sexual favors with Hutchinson. Now, a better way of saying that would be they were trying to leverage or request sexual favors of Hutchinson, but I get your point. Sexual texts from members trying to engage in sex with Hutchinson, the witness. I mean, look, she may be drop dead gorgeous or whatever, but so what? She's the witness in a huge investigation, and you're on the effing job. You're supposed to be investigating a potentially huge crime, even though you're investigating a huge crime that you only think happened, the treason being investigating the previous treason. But like, I can't even imagine not being able to keep your mind on that job, no matter who's sitting there. And I can't believe that. Was it during the hearing? Boy, this witness. God, this witness, I'd love to just take my pants off right now. It's like, work, do your job. I guess I want to revoke the in-person work order very quickly. Like, you guys, I know what you're going to do on the Zoom meeting, but you might remember to turn your camera off and at least give us the option of not seeing you do this. Additionally, a member of Johnson's staff told Loudermilk aides that Hutchinson, an aide to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, could, quote, potentially reveal embarrassing information, according to a separate email reviewed by the Post and corroborated by 2 additional people. Johnson echoed those sentiments on Thursday, telling reporters that, quote, it didn't make sense to give her any more attention. She had already testified, and it was a bit of a debacle. That's avoiding the issue. In the last Congress, Loudermilk headed a Republican investigation into the January 6th attack, which included among its targets the Democratic probe of the attack that finished its work in 2022. Critics have attacked the GOP investigation as part of Trump's effort to rewrite the history of what happened that day and to seek retribution against those who blamed him for inciting the violence. Loudermilk had been jockeying to lead a reconstituted investigation this year. On Wednesday, Johnson appointed him to chair a new select subcommittee that would continue the probe, which is amazing that they would do that. And now, basically, really honestly, this should come up whether Hutchinson testifies or not. Tell us a little bit about this story. Loudermilk was considering issuing a subpoena to obtain testimony and electronic communications from Hutchinson because he believed that she could provide fresh information, according to two people involved with the probe, about one of the panel's central targets and a top political foe of Trump's who had orchestrated Hutchinson's surprise testimony, that being former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. So in their zeal to go after Liz Cheney, they thought that they could extract something from Cassidy Hutchinson. But the problem was that they also thought that they could inject something into her. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This one too, very hard to fathom how this. I still am not clear about when these Republicans allegedly texted Hutchinson. Was it when she was testifying to the January 6th committee? Because remember, the Republicans largely boycotted the January 6th committee, so they weren't there on the dais waiting for an opportunity to question her. It's possible that they were watching the proceedings on TV, even though they were supposedly boycotting them, because they were extraordinarily damaging. They ended up not being damaging at all. In the end, we learned, that Donald Trump was a treasonous insurrectionist, but to no avail. But it was interesting to find that stuff out. Were they watching it on TV and saying, this witness is so hot, I should text her? And I'm doing it all in Trump voice because that's essentially probably how it sounds in their heads. But I mean, I'm not clear when they did this thing. But that it would also interfere in the Loudermilk investigation, I understand. The Post reviewed documentation reflecting the concern of the Speaker's office ahead of the June meeting between him and Loudermilk. The documentation corroborated the account of the person who is familiar with the effort to prevent the text's release, but who has not seen the purported sexually explicit messages. So it's not even, they're sexually explicit messages, not just soliciting sex, like, hey, would you like to, whether it's, go out to dinner or, hey, would you like to have sex? But they're instead, I guess, sexually explicit. This is exactly what I would like to have happen between my body parts and yours. What do you say? No record of whether she answered. I'm busy right now testifying about treason and the effort to overthrow the American government. But thanks for, what? But ultimately, we don't know about this stuff, maybe largely because at bottom, although it was interesting to hear the truth about these events of January 6th from Cassidy Hutchinson, she is a Republican. And I don't know if she considers herself still a Trump loyalist, but she was in the position to observe this stuff that she observed because she was a Trump loyalist. And I guess we could throw in here, she, at the point that she observes the stuff that the January 6th committee is interested in, she is a early 20-something recent college graduate who just happened to land a nice job with the chief of staff in the Trump White House. And how do you land something like that, like 2-3 years out of college, and put 2 and 2 together, and now you know why Republican members, apparently multiple, are sexting her. Why do you even ask for that phone number? I have no idea. But, I mean, that's the way these guys' minds work, which is why we don't want them governing. Anyway, where were we here? Right. So the Post reviewed this documentation about the concerns that the Speaker's office has before the June meeting where Loudermilk asks, hey, what do you say we subpoena Cassidy Hutchinson? And the Speaker says, what do you say we don't? Okay. The Post has not identified who sent the texts or determined whether Hutchinson responded, which would be interesting too. And maybe she's not responding because her responses aren't, ew, gross, get the F out of here, I'm calling the police. Or maybe maybe that was her response and she just doesn't want to hurt Republicans. Or maybe her response wasn't great. I don't know. Or maybe her response, she wanted her response to be, ew, gross, get the hell out of here, I'm calling the police. But in an effort to protect herself, because why do members of Congress have her phone number in the first place? And I guess you could feel very threatened in a Trump-dominated environment where maybe they'll overthrow the government at any minute, and you do what women have always had to do to get rid of sex pests. You say something non-committal and hope that they lose interest. In a statement provided in response to an inquiry from the Post, Hutchinson's lawyer, Bill Jordan, did not address the existence of texts and said his client had cooperated voluntarily with the investigation. He also criticized the interim report Loudermilk issued in December, which accused Cheney of, quote, secretly communicating with Hutchinson about without Hutchinson's attorney's knowledge. Though, of course, we had read something about that. That was basically Liz Cheney saying, are you being well advised by your attorney? I understand you have representation, but I understand that the representation was sort of assigned to you and is being paid for by somebody who is a defendant in all of this stuff. Maybe you should get your own lawyer who will actually work for your interests. You're a 20-something young woman. You're not a lawyer yourself. Maybe you don't know that just because you, quote unquote, have a lawyer doesn't mean that that lawyer is actually working for you if someone else is paying them. Ms. Hutchinson has testified truthfully and stands behind every word, despite the efforts of men in powerful positions to attack her, maybe even sexually, apparently, Jordan said. Asked Thursday afternoon at the Capitol whether he or his staff had discouraged a subpoena of Hutchinson, Johnson said the decision was Loudermilk's, and based on the assessment that it wasn't necessary. She was cooperating, he said. She wanted to come testify. To Loudermilk? Is that right? Loudermilk, also approached at the Capitol, said, I have no idea, when asked if he knew of any members who had sent personal messages to Hutchinson. Well, what was he asked? Do you know of any members who had sent? Do you know the names of the members? Maybe not. But does he know of any members? He does, because we now have documentation that Johnson's aides told aides. Maybe the message didn't make it all the way to him. I guess that's how they're trying to parse it. But okay. A spokesman for Cheney, meanwhile, excoriated Loudermilk for suggesting that she had behaved inappropriately in her dealings with Hutchinson during the original January 6th investigation. Representative Loudermilk should be ashamed of the maliciously false lies he is peddling, spokesman Jeremy Adler said. Loudermilk told CNN in an interview earlier this month that Johnson had agreed that his probe from the previous Congress would be reconstituted this year in a new committee. Johnson's announcement Wednesday specified that the new investigative subcommittee would now sit within the House Judiciary Committee, which is chaired by Representative Jim Jordan. It previously lived under House Administration Committee Chairman Brian, I don't know whether it's Steele or Stile, S-T-E-I-L, Republican of Wisconsin. Steele, he probably thinks Steele sounds cool. Remington Steele declined to comment about why the probe moved. There's the answer. Jordan told reporters it's what the speaker wanted. So now the key is go back and look at who was on the appropriate subcommittee chaired by Steele. Previously lived under House Administration Committee Chair Steele. Okay, so I guess the House Administration Committee last Congress had a subcommittee that I guess Loudermilk was the chair of, that was doing the investigating. You got to look at the Republican roster there. Unless, of course, I guess it could have been another Republican member observing the hearings from outside the room and saying, boy, that Cassidy Hutchinson, I'd like to get my hands on her, and just finding her number somehow. Hey, come in here. Call my chief of staff. Get me this girl's number. Can you imagine asking that? All right. But the prime suspects, of course, would probably be the members of this subcommittee. The fact that it's moving to the Judiciary Committee is what? I don't know. Is that where Loudermilk moved to? Was he on both anyway? Or what? I'm not really certain. But they're probably moving it because they're like, I don't want Hutchinson in the same room with the guy who sexted her before. Cheney, along with members and some staff on the Democratic committee, has since received a blanket preemptive pardon from President Joe Biden to shield against criminal prosecutions by the Trump administration. Hutchinson was not among those receiving pardons. Over the course of the investigation, Loudermilk's team obtained never-before-seen correspondence documenting apparent concerns Cheney had about communicating with Hutchinson without her lawyer. In early 2024, Loudermilk instructed Hutchinson to produce and preserve all records related to January 6th, but staff did not call Hutchinson to testify under oath before the committee. Staffers involved with the investigation argued that more could be gleaned from her with the help of the panel's subpoena power. It's not clear if Cheney's pardon will dampen enthusiasm for the House panel to continue its line of investigation. A growing number of House members and Trump allies are calling for deeper investigations around those who received preemptive pardons from Biden. They're very mad about that, of course. And Trump himself has indicated that recasting the narrative around the January 6th attack is still front of mind, issuing a blanket pardon on Monday evening for virtually all of the defendants convicted for their roles in the riot. He commuted the sentences of the remaining 14, cutting short sentences for 9 members of the Oath Keepers and 5 members of the Proud Boys, both far-right groups. Loudermilk told reporters on Inauguration Day that Trump himself had asked him to continue the investigation and continue to expose the truth. I know President Trump is 100% behind it, Loudermilk said. We'll see whether that changes if it turns out that big Trump fans were interested in exposing themselves during the exposition of the truth. It's hard to believe that these guys are so depraved and walking around, but that seems to be the sad truth of it. Let's see. Other things I wanted to bring to your attention, there maybe are lesser known issues these days, but this one piqued my interest as well. And not just because it's written by Kristen McPeak of KUTV out in Utah. Utah school districts, the headline reads, respond to federal immigration arrests being allowed in schools. We may have mentioned somewhere along the line that Trump issued another one of his, day one orders, was rescinding the policy that ordinarily prevents ICE and immigration officials from raiding sensitive areas. In other words, pulling people out of church when they've sought sanctuary there, conducting raids in schools and hospitals, etc. Just the local angle on it. Utah school districts respond to federal immigration arrests being allowed in schools. And what do they mean? It's actually, run-of-the-mill preparations. This can happen now. You should be aware of it. The Department of Homeland Security has announced that federal immigration officers are now authorized to make arrests in schools and churches, locations that were previously considered off limits. This new directive, effective as of Inauguration Week, comes under the Trump administration and has raised concerns among parents. In response to the policy shift, local school districts have begun notifying parents about the changes. Schools with Granite, Canyons, and Salt Lake City school districts have sent out letters and notifications to families and principals, assuring them that everything has jumped around here, that all children are still welcome regardless of immigration status. They're welcome to come in and be arrested there, but they are still welcome. The school officials actually care about kids, generally speaking. Tema Martin, a parent of a high schooler in the Salt Lake City school district, expressed her concerns after receiving a notification from her district. What it represents is terrifying and heartbreaking, Martin said. District spokesperson Yandere Chatwin emphasized that the district does not collect immigration information for students. The notice added that Salt Lake City School District public schools will not initiate engagement with federal immigration authorities for the purpose of sharing student information. Chatwin added that counselors are available in the school if the students need it. She noted that they have been following updates from the Department of Homeland Security closely, aware that the new policy might cause fear and anxiety among some families. I was actually more interested in having it causing fear and anxiety among the teachers who I know, having, discussed this in the past. Utah is one of the states that thought it best to allow their teachers to arm themselves in the classroom. Of course, we learned about it and first discussed it in the context of one of the teachers accidentally shooting herself in the bathroom in the school, or if you want to get technical about it, possibly shooting the toilet and then injuring herself with porcelain shrapnel. But, ordinarily the toilet doesn't explode on its own. It was the gun that did it. And so, there's that. So one of the more famous gun fail stories in that continuing saga. But with armed teachers, I'm just sort of curious. I hope there's no situation arises in which unannounced visitors, maybe in unmarked vehicles and in plain clothes, burst into Utah schools in an effort to, why don't you just go just seize these students who are illegally in the United States, allegedly, and drag them out. But I don't know, unidentified gunmen barge into the school and want to kick down the door of the classroom, and there's an armed teacher on the other side who doesn't know about a secret immigration raid. Gun battle ensues. God only knows what happens. Is it unlikely? Yes, thank God. Is it possible? Yes, unfortunately. I'm just curious how that might shake out and how they're handling it, and whether the preparations in talking to the school staff include, by the way, now you have to hesitate when unidentified armed adults force their way into your classroom. They could be federal agents. They could be, local Proud Boys who think they'll get pardoned for this too. Should you shoot them? I don't know. I don't know how to advise you on that. I guess you could demand their identification, but in all likelihood, they'll tell you, go F yourself. We demand your identification. Why are you trying to protect these illegals? Because I don't know whether you're a federal agent or a Proud Boy. I don't know whether you're a school shooter or a law enforcement officer. Can't tell the difference right now. Because the reports that have been coming out of late for the immigration raids at workplaces, like we heard news from or that were threatened in Chicago, then threatened in California, and now apparently actually executed in Newark, New Jersey just the other day, rounding up some small-ish number, in the hundreds, but some number of unfortunate victims, but not 11 million of them, or 20 billion, or whatever the number might be this morning in Donald Trump's mind, but a token few in a blue state, of course. but apparently it's unmarked vans and plainclothes officers, and that poses a danger for everyone, and in this case poses additional danger because it's happening in the context of armed school teachers who are on alert because there was another school shooting just the other day. Did I read correctly? Like Nashville area, in which you'll never believe it, but a male student who left behind a weird online profile of incel men's rights pickup artist type profile shot a girl in school. And we barely notice school shootings anymore. I didn't even grab the thing to report the story. I should go ahead and find it right now. And let's see if we can pick up the news of it. All you really have to do is Google school shooting, and I'll bring you to the latest one. Antioch school shooting. Nashville suspect 17 posted alt-right paraphernalia. Is that real? It's propaganda, probably. Or he had maybe photos of alt-right paraphernalia, photos from past school shootings, we are told by the Tennessean. Angela Latham has written this piece. 2 students are dead, 1 injured after a 17-year-old male student armed with a handgun opened fire in the cafeteria of Antioch High School in Nashville on Wednesday morning. The student then fatally shot himself, according to Metro Nashville Police Department. No armed teacher saved the day. He, I guess, saved the day himself. The shooter, identified as, do we tell everybody? Solomon Henderson by Metro Nashville Police, was 17-year-old student at the school. I thought we didn't give out those names when they were under 18, but to hell with that. Nashville Police Chief John Drake said during a 2:30 p.m. news conference, there are online, quote, materials that are factoring into police's investigation. As to a motive, we're looking into that, Drake said. There are some materials on the internet that we're looking at that's under investigation. A nearly 300-page document posted on the X social media platform contains numerous selfies of what appeared to be the shooter with various alt-right paraphernalia scattered between statements against race mixing, wishes to take revenge on society, statements praising Adolf Hitler, and pages of explicit photos from previous school shootings. Social media accounts linked in the document and scattered across many platforms, including X, Kick, TikTok, and more focused heavily on the Groyper content, a nickname used by many online white nationalists and neo-Nazi groups, as well as incel content, a name referring to young men who claim to be, quote, involuntarily celibate. That's the new euphemism for you're young and you haven't had any sexual experience yet, and what the hell did you think was going to happen here? And espoused incredibly violent misogynistic views. In the same document, it updated 4 hours before the shooting. The writer expressed dismay at having to, quote, speed up an original plan to commit the shooting on Thursday, move it up to Wednesday, and said their goal was to kill, quote, at least 10 people. Well, you failed there as well, thankfully, alongside a specifically targeted elementary school teacher who was not named. On a Blue Sky account, linked in the document, a post on Wednesday morning read, "Today seems like a good day to die." The shooter also appears to have live streamed the attack from multiple platforms, including Kick. Wednesday night, Kick confirmed the shooting was partly live streamed on the platform, and the account was rapidly banned and the content removed. But I'm sure he was posthumously made a member of the board of X. We extend our thoughts to everyone impacted by this event, the company said in a statement on X. Violence has no place on Kick. The PR movement, the PR has to happen there. We can skip it. In another document linked to the shooter's alleged social media, which are all under various pseudonyms, a nearly 50-page rant lays out more detailed motivations and inspirations. Candace Owens, a Nashville-based conservative commentator who was recently temporarily suspended for YouTube for hate speech, is credited in the document as an inspiration. The document says the writer was stunned by her insights and her own views, which helped push the writer further and further into his anti-Semitic beliefs. Owens on Wednesday night responded to her name being in the documents in a post on X. Let's deny everything. I'm sure she goes ahead and does that. Among others, the document also names far-right political podcaster Nick Fuentes, far-right podcaster Ethan Ralph, never heard of that guy, among other prominent far-right commentators that espouse white nationalist views, as well as Destiny, a popular left-leaning streamer. Don't know anything about her either. Also in the document were images promoting the Great Replacement theory. That's no surprise there. But goodness, well, another huge tragedy driven by online right-wing propaganda. Kids are not growing up right in these situations. I don't know. But anyway, that occurred to me and needed to be reported on my way to other things. Let's see. We have just a few minutes left, of course. Let me add this one because I think we can actually fit it in. And there's so many things that I'm falling behind on, but just another. So earlier in the program, I mentioned that Donald Trump had issued the pardons to the two police officers and then just completely made it obvious that he had really no grasp of the situation and what it meant and why these officers were convicted in the first place. And at a minimum, he's minimizing what they did. I don't know. They were chasing an illegal, which is not right, not true. And of course, wouldn't be right anyway. But in his mind, that's a good reason to risk life and limb, both the officers and the suspects and everybody around them. Risk their lives in order to catch an illegal, but there was no indication. And there's no indication from the story that there was at any point that these guys thought that he was illegal in any sense. He was riding a moped on the sidewalk. That's a good reason to want to stop somebody. Sure, that's good. Chasing them all over creation like that, no, not good. Overzealous, dangerous, and against regulations for good reasons. Somebody could get killed, and then they did get somebody killed. And then they tried to cover that up. Why did they cover it up? Because they knew that they were in violation of department policy and they were going to get themselves in trouble. Then, of course, the cover-up becomes the crime. The other guy gets involved. Oh, my God. What a disaster. But the point here is Trump knows nothing about it, or at least won't admit anything. I guess something went wrong. Well, just one other similar loopy comment, as he frequently makes. And just more evidence on the pile for when they finally, when it becomes obvious to everyone, even people trying to explain everything away, that he's just out of it. This one from ABC News. President Donald Trump goes off the rails. This is the headline. Goes off the rails when asked about California wildfires. Reported by Rob Hayes here. And not listed as an opinion piece. This is under politics. Goes off the rails. How so? President Donald Trump, with top technology CEOs at his side Tuesday afternoon, announced a new $500 billion artificial intelligence infrastructure project, which by itself apparently is off the rails, and sending MAGA into a tizzy because the AI project, well, it's also sending Elon Musk into a tizzy. You're not giving the $500 billion to me, it's to somebody else. And what are they going to do with it? Apparently, by the way, it was announced that the AI project was using AI to design new mRNA vaccines for application in fighting cancer, which on the one hand, good, fighting cancer. On the other hand, AI designed vaccine, AI designed healthcare. Like AI thinks we have 7 fingers. Do I want this thing handling my healthcare? Probably not. But also MAGA people hate vaccines. Anyway, with these CEOs at his side, he announces this new project. But when the conversation turned to California's wildfires, shouted questions, right? Trump went off the rails. And I don't even know how this begins, but it picks up here. When you're a rich person, you like to take showers, he said. Oh, God, this is going to be about water, isn't it? Yep. He claimed Los Angeles limits residents to just 38 gallons of water a day. He's got the number. And referred to some mythical valve that mythical is right in here, that could bring limitless water to LA. But that officials instead diverted it to the ocean. They had the water to fight these fires, but these incompetents, they put the water in the ocean instead. You know, that's what mountains do with rainwater. They send it to the ocean, but they use a valve to do it. Okay, sure, Grandpa, let's get you to bed. I know that's ageist, but goodness gracious. They have a valve. Think of a sink, which has a valve, but multiply it by many thousands of times the size of it. It's massive. There's a giant water tap in LA, he thinks. And you turn it back toward Los Angeles. Why aren't they doing it? Either they have a death wish, they're stupid, or there's something else going on that we don't understand. Trump said, imagine something going on that we don't understand. Trump, who criticized the response to the wildfires during his inaugural address, has said he will travel to Los Angeles on Friday. And, of course, he'll find the giant water tap. It is in the basement of a pizza place. So bring an AR-15 if you want to see it. Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday said, what did Governor Gavin Newsom say on Monday? The president of the United States is crazy off his ass and should be removed by the 25th Amendment as soon as possible so that we don't all get annihilated in a nuclear conflagration. A giant, can you imagine? I mean, this, again, we've been here before, but like Vermin Supreme isn't even crazy enough to get out there with a boot on his head and say, well, the reason there isn't enough water in Los Angeles is there's a gigantic water tap and they forgot to turn it on. But then they did turn it on, but they poured it into the ocean instead. What? There's no way to make this into a metaphor either. He was speaking metaphorically. No. I mean, I don't know what to tell you about this. But the rest of the article is about, you know, oh, well, he also spoke about this and that was bad and other people responded to this. But, I mean, seems like this could be a standalone thing and we should be talking about it. They have a valve. Think about a sink, but multiply it by many thousands of times the size of it. It's massive and you could turn it back towards Los Angeles. Why aren't they doing it? Why? It seems to me that a gigantic valve like that would be pretty easy to spot. Of course it doesn't exist. He's crazy. He's an idiot. And we're stuck with him, apparently. And I know people will come, well, even if you had 25th Amendment him out, you get J.D. Vance. Again, one more time, I'd be happy to accept allowing the charismatic J.D. Vance to try to take over Trump's Trump personality. I'd love to see him try to do it competently.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Now, coming up next, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Justice Putnam will take into the weekend with very important stories that we have missed, and I know there are concern to many people I've been speaking to that Trump froze federally funded cancer research, but then funded the other thing, canceled health science meetings, and outlawed all communications from the National Institute of Health. Have a healthy weekend. See you Monday.